Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this is the DC Collectibles Designer Series Greg Capullo, the Riddler. Yes, I did have a look at this figure, actually way back in December 22nd. On December 22nd, 2014 was the first time I had a look at this Riddler. And the reasoning why we're looking at him again is because he's my all-time favorite Riddler figure. Did you know that? Let's go ahead and take the tape measure and put it next to the figure. The figure stands just shy of 7 inches tall. He's about 6 3/4 of an inch in height. At the beginning of this review, I did use a display stand. However, the figure itself doesn't come with one. What he does come included with, though, is a cane. You probably will notice there's a big line right through the middle section of the cane. That's because the plastic that they used, of all the times that I would say use a more stable plastic, they used this very brittle plastic. As a result of it, it broke, I think, when I had it in the bag. I kept these ones stored away, and I guess weight just had gone on top of the cane here, and ultimately just broken in half. So I ended up having to take a little bit of glue. Didn't quite line up as much as I had hoped it would, but at the very least I've got myself a completed cane rather than just a broken in half cane. It does fit into his hand, although it only fits this hand. This hand here is, well, a flat palm. I suppose you could take the cane and loop it around his 4 fingers and have him holding the cane underneath his thumb. But there's just not enough clearance. And also for the nature of the fact that it's using a very brittle plastic, I don't want to force it as much to get that underneath. But it does, in theory, look like it could go underneath his hand, or you could have him holding it like this. But there's nothing really keeping that in place. Aside from a thumb, you're literally just kind of draping the cane onto that thumb. So I mean, if you have him on the display stand, you could probably have the cane resting on a stand or on a bookcase like this, but it really doesn't stay in place. It's more so intended to be in this hand, but the problem is, up to the point that it gets to the handle, it sits extremely loose in hand. It just drapes. Once it gets to the very end, it holds fine. And as well, you can rotate the hand, and once again, you can have the cane like this. You just attach it to the fingers like so. So there's a couple of different ways that you can sport it. But again, it's using a very brittle, I can't stress this enough, as I'm sure I've already stressed this enough, literally. It is a very thin, brittle plastic, so be very careful if you happen to pick this figure up for yourself, and you know, don't bend it if it's warped. Be very careful that you don't break it in the process. Taking it very carefully out of his hand, just putting it to the side. The other reasoning why I wanted to have a look at this particular figure was because I felt bad. As a reviewer, having a look at figures in the past, go back to the videos later and you feel like you're overly critical sometimes when it comes to certain figures. Case in point was the DC Collectibles black and white Greg Capullo Batman, which we just recently had a look at in a video. Now, I don't like the design of that Batman, or let me stress further, let me stress further though by saying this. I like Greg Capullo's artwork, but I never think that they translate well to figure. Then I had an aha moment and I thought, wait a minute, there was a figure that I thought translated extremely well to plastic form, and that is why, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we are having a look once again at the Greg Capullo Riddler, which is one of my all-time favorite, dare I almost say, my favorite Riddler of all time. Now, there's a couple of them that I still would put very high regard on. For example, the Mattel DC Universe Riddler. Overly muscular, yes, not the one with the suit, not like this one, but the one that had the traditional jumpsuit with the question marks all over the place. A little on the muscular side, yes, but I really do like that figure quite a bit. This Riddler as well, I would put that on that very high list of regard. And also the DC Direct Super Friends Riddler, which I want to kind of go back and have a look at, which I believe came with a Robin. That will come in a future video. But one of the options and benefits of doing these re-reviews, one of the big primary sells for it is it gives me a chance to go back and talk a little bit more about a figure that maybe I didn't talk enough about in the initial outing. It also gives me a chance to hopefully present the review a little bit better with a cleaner, more polished video, better camera, better lighting, so to speak. And again, when it comes to a Riddler like such as this here, for example, it gives me a chance to kind of go back and have a look at figures that I still love to this day. Some of my all-time favorites. You'll probably have noticed have made throwbacks on this channel already. And the ones that haven't, rest assured, some of my favorite figures will still be making reappearances on this channel. So as for it goes for this particular Riddler, this Riddler is sporting a three-piece suit consisting of lower trousers, a jacket, and vest. I don't know if the intent is this, but I do notice that the lower legs, and I don't even know whether I mentioned this in the video, but the lower legs seem to have different colors to them. This part of the leg seems a slightly different shade of green than this part of the leg, and this part of the green looks like it blends better to the jacket. You just have this very stark line here where this green just doesn't quite mesh with the rest of the figure. The lower sleeves I find almost have that same sort of problem. It's not quite the same green that's the green above it, but again, if you look at it from a distance, you may not notice it as much. I don't notice it as much when it comes to the sleeves. I do still notice, though, that the lower legs don't quite jive. Don't quite jive with what's happening here. As for the face sculpt, it is wonderful. He is sporting a pair of sideburns, which is kind of a new design element for the Riddler. He is a good mixture of both looking a very smart-looking Riddler and also a scheming Riddler as well, which I think is the two things that Riddler should be. If you only have one Batman Forever Riddler, played by Jim Carrey, if you're just zany, I think you missed the point of being the Riddler. Riddler has to be a little bit of smarts, as well as he has to be a bit of a scheming kind of Frank Gorshin sort of Riddler as well. I think it needs to have a little bit of both. And I think this Riddler does have that. It does have the little smirk, which tells me, I don't know if I'm reading too much into this, but it tells me that he knows he's smarter than everybody else. And that's why he's got this big, very deliciously arrogant smile across his face. One of the notable traits of Greg Capullo, and specifically DC Collectibles that transition that to plastic form, is that in favor of using black panel lining, they now go the route of almost like a reddish color. You'll see a lot of that happening in the corner areas of his mouth, where you've got the little curl representing his smile, and right above his brow, his furrowed brow there. The green is a slightly different, not only sheen than the rest of his outfit, but also a slightly different, darker color. And that doesn't bother me one bit, because it should stand out. It shouldn't be the same green that's representing the rest of his body. The jacket is of a softer plastic. I have this big what happening right down the middle area here that connects itself to the button. I don't know what's happened here. It's this weird, that's not supposed to be there, green, ultimately there anyways on the jacket. They painted in the buttons and also painted in the little slots where the buttons would go into place, and this one here is already buttoned up. Got yourself a vest, as well as a nice purple shirt and pink tie. He's a very well-dressed Riddler. Boulder cap, boulder hat on the top there of a smaller rim with an elevated question mark on the top there. Very well done, very well painted. Something's happened here along the way where the paint doesn't quite line up to the very notable carved in areas of the sculpt. Ultimately, it just has missed its mark on one area and didn't quite deliver on another. But again, like those little small things, I'm not going to really get too nitpicky about. I will, however, be very nitpicky when it comes to the plastic material that they use for the cane. A really bad choice. Softer plastic, though would have been warped, it still would not have been broken like this cane was here. That makes me so sad. Posability on this guy, his head rotates all the way around. His head also tips back and forth, up and down. The shoulders, unfortunately, with a lot of suited figures, you don't have the hinge happening outward. Instead, it's just a straight swivel. Now, I don't mind losing this for the total package, and I don't mean Lex Luthor, or Lex Luger, I should say. The total package Lex Luger probably would also be able to do this a little bit more. But total package-wise, I think the figure, for all its pros, I don't mind for the fact that it doesn't have hinges on the arms. It's to be expected. These hinges would be there as opposed to the ball joints, ball socket, shoulders. So again, those arms rotate all the way around. Now I'm thinking about Lex Luger. Sad what happened to that guy. Wheelchair bound now. Arms rotate back and forth. He's got the hinge happening in the elbow. And he's also got a rotation happening in the hand. Waist swivel, despite for the fact that his jacket sits over top of his waist, he does still have a cut allowing the waist to swivel back and forth. Legs hinge back and forth too. There's no hinge outward. Bend at the knee. And then you've also got a ball joint and hinge joint technically also in the foot. You've got an ankle pivot and a hinge back. He does have a peg hole on one of his feet. Sadly not the other. I don't really think you necessarily need peg holes on both the feet when the figure stands A, perfectly fine on his own, and B, base. If you do put him on a display base, which just so happens just to be a random base that I had kicking around over here, you could get him in more like walking poses and what have you, and you really only need one peg hole to accomplish that. I don't necessarily need two pegs, two peg holes. I think that's a little bit too much. It's not necessary. But there is Riddler. A nice looking figure. It's just a shame that his cane got broken along the way. I glued it as best I could. Apparently I glued it with my eyes closed. I probably could have lined that up a little bit better. I might take a little bit of sandpaper, just kind of smooth that out a little bit. But this should have really been of a softer plastic variety. My hope is that you guys are enjoying these throwbacks as much as I enjoy recording them. It gives me a real chance to go back and re-examine a figure that I looked at so many years ago with a fresh coat of paint, a fresh perspective, if you will. The camera has improved, the lighting I hope has improved, and I hope my perspective and the way I look at the figures are a little bit broader and maybe a little bit more in depth than when I looked at the figures the first time around. Greg Capullo is one of those interesting artists which I feel has had a tough time. His illustrations and artwork are fantastic on paper, but I really don't think they've ever translated well to plastic form. At least that's what I thought. The Batmans are one of my least favorite designs of Batman as an action figure, but then I thought to myself again, wait a minute, I have a Riddler. A Greg Capullo Riddler, which just so happens to be my favorite Riddler of all time. Which is why that has led us to this right now, and in final looks is why I'm describing this Riddler as my all-time favorite, and hopefully a little bit of a save, a little bit of recovery, if you will, for perhaps the negative comments that I made about the Greg Capullo Batman. Still one of my least favorite Batman figures, but the trade-off though is Greg Capullo's Riddler shines. He's got a great look to him, great paint, although the paint does get iffy. Not really sure what's happened with the greens, but ultimately they still kind of come together well. The only demerits I could give this figure, the only thing that would knock him down from being a perfect figure all around, is just his cane. Why they use brittle plastic putting together a cane for this? Because every little bit of bending that you do brings you one step closer to having a broken cane, which just so happens to be the case here when I pulled this guy out of bag. By the way, this is the last time this figure is going to be seeing a bag. This figure's going to be put on display, as he really should have been right from day one. One of my all-time favorite Riddlers is now going to be one of my all-time favorite pieces to put on display. Today we were having a look at a throwback of a figure that I did way back, I believe in 2014, so about 4 years ago. Today we were having a look once again at the DC Collectibles DC Designer Series Greg Capullo Riddler figure. This guy isn't overly expensive as well, so if you wanted to get him in aftermarket, and your best bet is that probably eBay, you should be able to get this guy for a fairly affordable price. Don't overlook this guy if you haven't picked up a Riddler yet, and or you're thinking to yourself, as you're sitting on a porch on a hot summer day with a cool lemonade, I'd like to get myself a Riddler, but which Riddler should I get? Right here, feast your eyes on probably one of the best Riddlers that you can put money into that you'll have on display and just admire from time to time. Pick yourself up the Greg Capullo Riddler figure, as I have, and which will be on display moving forward. You guys want to see more throwbacks? Let me know down below in the comment section, and maybe let me know what figure you'd like to see me re-review on this channel. Of course, we're going to have a look at newer figures as well. It's not always going to be going back and having a look at the vault of figures in my collection, but it is nice from time to time, sprinkled within the fields of new figure reviews on this channel. It's nice to put a little bit there of some of the old vintage figures that I had in my collection. I don't want to say vintage. This figure is not overly a vintage figure, but it's nice from time to time to go back and have a look at some older figures in my collection as well, which is what we did right here. Make sure as well you hit that little subscribe button down below, muchacho. That will guarantee you that when new figures are coming onto this channel, figure reviews, you'll never miss out. If you also want to go back and have a look at some of the other throwbacks that I've done, featuring some of my favorite figures of all time, there's a playlist just for that. We're going to have a look at some more throwbacks in some future videos, but don't worry, some new stuff is going to be heading your way as well. So thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time.